speak today about the violence against young black people. And I don't know if I'm fully qualified to speak on that topic when I've been sheltered from the majority of violence that is inflicted on black youth and black people in my community. But what I can talk about is that violence does not come in just one form. The violence I've experienced recently has been physical, state-authorized legal violence, reactionary violence, violence born of anger, authority, and privilege, and entitlement, and violence that is taught, violence that is supported, legitimized, and defended by the prevailing cultural standards. I've also experienced in my life personal violence, emotional violence, violence against the intrinsic self. I spent my childhood and my adolescence being punished for speaking out, for being loud, for taking up space, and for making noise. In my home, at school, by therapists and social workers, by strangers, by those in authority. Who I am, the strongest parts of me, my biggest strength, my most true self, were the parts of me that were demonized. This is the kind of violence that permeates every institution that grows within the boundaries of white supremacy. But there is more violence in our society than just violence against the individual. There is violence in our very structure, in the words that define the vague concepts of country, state, city, and town. When you think of violence, consider that all our laws are given legitimacy by the threat of violence from the state. We can point out that slavery was legal, and that helping those who were enslaved to escape was illegal, but the only difference between one act and the other in the eyes of the law is the authorization of violence against one and not the other. I want to talk a little bit about the origin of racism, because for most of my life, I was confused. I didn't know why black people were hated. I didn't know why people were racist against you because of, quote-unquote, the color of your skin. But it's because they're not racist against you because of the color of your skin. They're racist against you because it is economically and socially beneficial for them to be. Racism started in this country because they wanted to use slaves from Africa, and they took the description of those slaves from Africa, and they made that description a negative thing. And they said that those people were stupid, and those people were naturally workers, and those people didn't want to be paid, and those people were better enslaved, and all of that. That was all made up. It's not that you are hated because of the way you look, because of the physical features of you. You are hated because someone used those features to define you as a lower class. Something I also wanted to talk about is that statue up there. Yeah. I was up there the other day before I got banned from the Capitol, and I was reading the inscription around the statue and the story of why that statue was put up. It was the first Supreme Court case in Iowa where essentially they gave a black man his freedom. Except it wasn't very heartwarming to me because they had to use these methods of the state to legitimize this black man's freedom, a thing that he naturally had. And still, when they did this, they made him pay back the property that was lost from the slave owner, the property that was him as a person. They made him pay that back. That was part of the decision that was made, and we're celebrating that. I don't feel like celebrating that. Even those small wins that we get are still a Pyrrhic victory. It's still a loss in one term or another. I wanted to talk about that statute to outline that the laws that we have are created by the state and for the interest of those with money and power. They are enforced by the police, in the past by slave patrols, by the sheriff's department, by the state patrol. These laws are given their legitimacy by the threat of or by acts of violence against us. Something I learned today, speaking with my lawyer this morning, was that it is illegal in the state of Iowa to resist arrest. It is also illegal to attempt to help someone being arrested. And this does not matter if the arrest is legal or illegal. It is illegal to resist an illegal arrest in the state of Iowa. And it's not that way everywhere. In Wisconsin, you can legally resist an illegal arrest, but not in the state of Iowa. Do we think that's right? No! Do we think that, honestly, do we think that looking at that one law, that we can say that any of the laws that they put on us are legitimate. Something I think that we should all question moving forward in challenging these institutions is the legitimacy of those laws that they inflict on us. The difference between right and wrong and illegal and legal. Because there is a difference. We need to question if we want to change our laws to reflect what we believe to be right, or change our society and change our views of legitimate authority and the necessity of state-sanctioned violence. Now, one of the themes of this event is the intersections of identity. So I wanted to talk a little bit, because I don't usually talk about the intersections of my identity. I have intersections of oppression, which is usually what we're talking about when we're talking about intersections of identity. I have the intersections of oppression from race, from sex, from gender, sexuality, disability. But I also have intersections of privilege. I have privileges that intersect with those oppressions. I was raised in a really, really white, pretty much everything, in a white neighborhood, in a white school. I have half my family is white. That's my dad standing right there. And I have a lot of proximity to whiteness. I have learned a lot of the tools of the white supremacist oppressor, the tools that will get me, that keep me quote-unquote well-spoken, that teach me how to present myself in institutions that live on white supremacy, that teach me how to get a job, that teach me all of those things, that teach me how to act and how to not be what they have defined as lesser. And I think that because of my proximity to whiteness, it puts me in a position to hold white Iowa accountable. Because this state is a majority white, and this movement, this city is a majority white, and this movement is a lot different than it is in other cities in America. It's a lot different than it is in Minneapolis, or in Seattle, or in LA, or in San Diego. And I've seen a lot of people question the methods that have been happening during this uprising, movement, revolution, whatever you want to call it. And I've seen a lot of people who agree, but don't agree with how it's being done, or think it's a good thing, but wouldn't get involved themselves. And I think that I just want to question, to all the white people in the crowd, to all the white people who are watching now, to all the white people who are going to watch later, to the news stations that are watching me now, to the news stations that are going to broadcast parts of the speech or none of the speech or put it in your articles, I want you to question the choices that you make. Would you call the police on anybody ever for anything? Someone is saying fuck no, but are all of you saying fuck no? I know that you're all not. I know that you're all not. And that's okay. I want you to question it right now. I want you to think about those choices that you make. I want to think about the beliefs that you hold, about the legitimacy of our state, about the legitimacy of our institutions, the legitimacy of the barriers that they put up, the legitimacy of the requirements that they put to get into certain spaces, and who they hold out. And the legitimacy of those organizations existing at all. I want you to question, when you are in these marches, when you're chanting, when you're tweeting, when you're posting on Facebook, when you're talking about your beliefs, do you actually believe what you're saying when you say defund the police? Or do you say, oh, people are saying defund the police, but what they really mean is reform the police. What they really mean is change the definition of the police. Or do you mean defund the police and abolish the police? I want y'all to ask that. Ask that to yourself. Investigate that stuff. Investigate that in yourself. I want you to challenge your perspectives on tactics, on violence against property. And I put violence in quotes in my notes, because I don't define violence against property as violence. But I want you to question, how many of you, or how many of your friends, or your family, your grandparents, your uncles, your parents said, I agree with what Black Lives Matter is doing, I agree with the movement going on in Des Moines right now, but I don't agree with what they did to that police car. Or I don't agree with, put up your hand, I don't agree with the breaking windows. Or I don't agree with being in the street. I don't agree with blocking traffic. Any of that. You need to challenge that. You need to challenge that in yourself. And if you have the privilege and the opportunity, you need to challenge that in your homes, in your families, and in your friend group. I want you to change your perspective on institutions. There are a lot of times when we're talking about the police with people who are in power, with people who have authority, people on city councils, people in other representative positions. We have to point out that, yes, you have had good interactions with the police. You feel like the police protect you. You don't have the police patrolling your neighborhood. The police come when you call, but they don't for others. And I just want to dig deeper into that, because I think that when we're having those conversations, it can come to a point where it's, well, the police are good for you, but they're bad for me, and it can come to the conclusion that, well, we need to change this institution so that's better for everybody. But I don't want to change this institution so it's better for everybody. I want to get rid of this institution. Because, first of all, it is intrinsic to that institution that it is inflicting violence on one group and not another. It is intrinsic to that institution that it inflicts violence at all. As I was talking about, the legitimacy of laws and the upholding of laws is literally just a threat of violence, and that is the authority of the state, is the threat of violence. And I want to question, I want to ask you, do you want to live in a world where anyone experiences those things? Where anyone experiences violence by the police? Where the punishment for breaking the law is going to prison? I was in Polk County Jail. And if I didn't know that I was going to get out, if I didn't have the support of an amazing community that posted a $21,600 bond for me, if I didn't have that support, I would have had a much different experience. Because immediately when I walked in, I was being talked down to. I was being verbally abused. I was being physically abused. I was in chains. I have scars on my stomach from the chains they put me in. I was in dingy rooms that had blood on the walls, that were made completely of concrete and brick. I was put in a solitary cell for speaking out. I was put in there alone. I never got a phone call. I never got any kind of comfort. I never got any kind of human treatment. The purpose of that institution is to dehumanize. The purpose of that institution is to take away your humanity and your right as a person. And I want to question you, if someone does the worst thing you can imagine, do they deserve that? I really want you to think about that. And even if you think they do you want to live in a world where that happens to anybody? A lot of the time when we're talking about the people that died that sparked this movement, like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Tony McDade, and those that have died since, Elijah McClain, we talk about justice. We say justice for Breonna Taylor. I know y'all have seen that about 100,000 times every single day, whether it's in a respectful way or a disrespectful way. You see justice for Breonna Taylor. But what does that justice mean? When you're saying arrest the officers who killed Breonna Taylor, when you're saying imprison the officers who killed Breonna Taylor, when you're saying that, you are leading on an institution that is built to oppress people. You're leading on an institution that inflicts violence based on these laws that they inflict on us. And I really want y'all to challenge that is the way that we find justice for these people. Is justice punishing them in the way that they punished us? Or is justice taking away their power? Is justice building a world where no one can do that again? Mm-hmm. There have been some times that I've been thinking, and I get a little philosophical and it feels a little cheesy, but sometimes I'm thinking out loud, whether it's to my friends or my family, long conversations with my dad or my sister, or if it's just reading on Twitter at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I think those who have done evil things deserve evil things to be done back to them. Those who inflicted horrors upon us deserve to have horrors inflicted on them. But I don't want to live in a world where horrors exist. We asked for justice for Breonna Taylor. We asked for justice for George Floyd. We asked for justice for Tony McDade, for Sandra Bland, for all those who never got justice, for all those who never will. But I don't think that they can get justice. Because I think the only justice is for the living. Justice of living in a world where those things don't happen. Justice of building a world where we're protected and we're cared for. The justice of living in a world where people don't have power to do that to us. And I'm going to say it again, there is only justice for the living. so we can mourn for our dead, but we have to find justice for us today and for those in the future. The last thing I want to touch on is I want to challenge you guys. I want to challenge, how much are you doing for this movement? We have seen less and less numbers in the street. How many of you are coming to these events and you don't come to others? How many of you are saying that you support us, but you don't want to come to an event where you think there might be property damage, or there might be violence, or it might be dangerous? Think about the fact that it might be less dangerous if you were there, if we had numbers. Think about the fact that the police couldn't have held protesters on Monday if there were more of them. Think about the fact that bringing your family might protect people, because it would look a lot worse if they were hurting you. Think about the fact that all of your white friends and your white family and the white people who are in the crowd today, if you were there, you might be protecting people. Think about what you could be doing from home. Think about how much more you could be doing, not just signing a petition, although you should, not just retweeting the injustices that are happening, even though you should, but also pushing others to do that, going out into your neighborhoods and telling them to sign a petition, going to your families and telling them to sign a petition, doing things from home, doing email campaigns, emailing Tim Reynolds 100 times a day. You could be doing more. I want you guys to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Do more than you're comfortable with. Because we're all uncomfortable right now. And we need a lot more people to be uncomfortable to make a difference. This entire system needs to be challenged, and the entire system needs to be destroyed if we want to live in a world where there's true justice. There's a lot of learning that I have to do, and there's a lot of learning we all have to do, and a lot of mistakes that we have to make to get to that point. But we have to challenge ourselves to do better. I want to challenge all of you in the crowd who consider yourself an ally to try to be an accomplice, to do more, to uplift voices, to be a physical barrier, to protect people from violence, and to create a world where we don't have to protect ourselves from violence anymore.